All right, it is 7 o'clock, which means it's time for Toolbox Tuesday. I want to thank you for coming out. This is our weekly webinar series designed to help put tools in your toolbox to help you pound out problems and sharpen your saw. Tonight, we've got a really special event. We've got the 2017 District 6 International Speech Champion who is going to be giving a presentation on giving a speech. So the title of our webinar this week is So You Want to Enter a Speech Contest. And before we go into Mark's presentation, we want to roll back the clock a little bit, back to 2017 at our spring conference. And Mark was just about to take the stage and deliver the speech, which would eventually send him off to Vancouver to compete in the World Championship of Public Speaking. So we're going to take about 7 minutes and watch that video. Let me get that queued up.
The Power of a Hug, Mark Skipper.
Listen closely to the question I am about to ask, because the answer could save someone's life. Mr. Toastmaster, members, and guests. Question. Let me see a show of hands of who likes to hug. Just as I thought. Half of the room would raise their hands, and 100% of them would be women. It's something about women that they understand the power of a hug. They know that hugs exchanges energy, that it makes people feel safe and makes them feel secure. Men, it's a different story. We don't quite understand the power of a hug. So I hope over the next few minutes to share why it is important for you and me to hug. Because I'm a man, I understand that it's not natural for us to hug, but I also believe some of our past experiences may have impacted how we feel about hugs. Let me share an experience that I had. In fact, every summer, my family would go down to visit my mother's sisters. And my mother's sisters would give me what I call auntie hugs. Or a better name for auntie hugs might be the hug of death. We would go to visit Aunt Mayreen, and Aunt Mayreen would see me walk in the door, and the first thing she would say, "Look at that big-head little boy. Ooh, you got a big head. Come here and give me a hug." And let me tell you, like I said, it would be so tight and I can barely breathe. I hated being hugged. But as I look back as an adult at that experience, I have to admit it made me feel loved, made me feel safe, made me feel secure. I guess there's really power in a hug. As I got older, I began to notice that men were beginning to greet other men with a hug similar to what women currently do. But it was a little bit different. In fact, we call those bro hugs. And for the women out there, you're trying to figure out what is a bro hug? Let me give you a demonstration of a bro hug. So you're out and about and you see a friend. "Hey, Mike," the friend says. "Hey, Mark." The first thing you do, you step up and you give them an aggressive handshake. The second thing you do, you both pull each other close, almost like you're doing a chest bump. Third, you both take your left arm and you wrap it around the back of the other. Now, ladies, this is the most important part, so pay attention. You give 2 quick pats on the back. Pop, pop. Then you got to let go. Because if it lasts more than 2 minutes, it's no longer a bro hug. So I think every man that's out there that has ever done a bro hug would admit that you feel pretty energized after you do that with a friend. There is power in a hug. This third story I want to tell you. Now, really listen to this. The first thing talking about the ant hugs was more of how it makes you feel. The bro hug, how the two of you feel. But in this story, it's really about when you give a hug, how it makes someone else feel. I met this guy last summer by the name of Terrence Talley. Terrence travels around the country and he makes inspirational speeches at high schools. He's helping teenagers to deal with the crazy things that teenagers just have to deal with. Well, one of the things he does at the end of every speech, he offers to the students to come down, stand in line, and receive a dad hug. Well, this one particular time, he gave his presentation. It was no different than any other time. He made the offer to the students, if you'd like to receive a dad hug, come on down. The line whipped around of kids that are standing in line just to get a hug. So one by one, the students came up, and Terrence gave them a hug. From his right peripheral, Terrence saw that there was a young man dressed all in black with black fingernails that was pacing back and forth. Terrence thought to himself, that's a little strange, and then he focused back on the students and continued to give them all a hug. As the last student came through, got that hug, that young man whipped around in front of Terrence, pointed his finger in his face and said, you made me feel something. And then out of nowhere, he gave Terrence the biggest bear hug he had ever had. Terrence said, you're the reason why I'm here. He then ran out the room and went to his first class. In that class, none of the students would ever talk to that young man. This time was different. One of the students looked at him and said, did Terrence give you a hug? And he said, you know, that was the first time I'd ever received a hug. One by one, those students walked up to that young man, and they each gave him a hug. Apparently, that was too much for him. He felt a tear coming out. He let go, and then he ran out the room. This time, he went to the principal's office. He walked in, and he was crying. The principal asked, why are you crying? And he began to share his story. The young man stopped. He reached down into his book bag and pulled out a gun. He set the gun on the desk and said, today, I was about to kill myself. If there's any reason that you can think that there is not power in a hug, I hope that has changed your mind.
So that was Mark's speech back in 2017. Our speaker tonight is, as I said, Mark Skipper. And it is my ultimate pleasure to turn the meeting over to him. Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Dave. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Skipper, and I am excited to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about competing in speech contests. I can tell you that on May 5th in 2017, that was probably the most exciting moment that I've had in my entire life. Having that opportunity to get on that stage, to share my speech, and to see people out there reacting to what I had to say. I walked away that night feeling extremely confident and looking forward to the next competition. So if your question is, why should I participate? in a speech competition, for me, it was the confidence that it gave me after that experience. So what I want to do is share with you 6 things that I believe helped me to make it to the district level and to actually win at the district competition. Chances are most of these things you already know, but some things might be at least one aha that you didn't think of before. So the first thing that I would ask you to write down is the word topic. Uh-oh. Because I can't write it down. Doesn't look like it's going to show. So the first word you just write down, topic. One of the things that people have asked a lot of me is, how do you decide what you're going to speak about? One of the things that I found that was the easiest when it comes as far as coming up with topics is talking about personal experience. If you listen to my speech, there were a number of experiences that I shared throughout that. The first one, I talked about the hugs that I received from my aunts growing up. I had fond memories about that. I can always remember going to see my Aunt Mayreen, and she would bend down low and she'd give me this tight hug. And when I'm not looking, she'd give me a little twitch of the whisker in the side of my face. You know, at the time I didn't think about it, that it was any big deal, but as an adult, I started thinking about that. And, you know, I thought that was a pretty funny experience. The other personal one was the handshakes. When I got into college, you would see guys all over. That's how we would greet one another, was to come do these bro hugs. I didn't even realize that there was a name for it until I just Googled it one day. And they actually would give you directions on how to bro hug. So for me, when I got up to speak, it was a lot easier for me to connect because I was talking about my personal experiences. Another thing on the topic is try to find things that will engage and cause emotion in your audience. For me, the number of things that I use is humor. And the bro hug caused a lot of reaction in the humor. The last story about the young man really touched a lot of hearts. Thinking about things in your personal experience that you can pull out that's going to take those emotions up high, up low, keep them kind of off of, at least on their toes, going up and down in their emotion. And then the last thing that I think that's really important is you take those personal experiences, you incorporate some of that emotional stuff throughout it. Then you have to decide, where is a moral in those experiences that I had? What can people walk away from and be able to relate to their personal lives? Because as you go out and you're competing against other people, those topics that the vast majority of the people can relate to, those will be the speeches that people will remember, cause them to think as you're giving your speech, and pull them in personally. So thinking about personal experiences, creating those emotions, and also making sure that it has a moral, a purpose at the end that's going to pull the vast majority of people. Now, one of the things that I did in preparation for going to the speech would be the number 2 thing I would put up here, and that's finding good advisors. Good advisors. And when I say good advisors, those that you trust as far as evaluating your speeches. One of the things that I did when I came up with both that speech and other speeches, I would practice them in my Toastmasters club. I happen to be in TikTokers, which is located in Plymouth. We have a number of members that do a fantastic job of being able to make you feel good by pointing out the things you do well, but also giving you really good recommendations on how to make your presentation strong. So there were about 4 or 5 people in my club that over time, I became to really trust their advice in my speeches. I really found that out as I began to travel around the district and I would visit other clubs. And one thing that I can tell you, everybody has advice. And so once you start having 10, 20, 30, 40 people giving you advice, and if you start taking and making changes, the speech that you started out with will be a totally different speech from when you first began developing your speech. So for me, that helped me to understand how important it was for me to have those 5 individuals that I truly trusted to really focus on what they shared with me. And really, as I went around and visited other chapters, to use that as an opportunity to practice what they shared. Sometimes too much advice can be bad advice. So that's the second thing I would highly recommend to anybody that is considering competing in this year's competition. The third thing I would say is just be natural. Be yourself. Do not be theatrical. One of the things I had seen over the years when I would go to different competitions, I noticed that the vast majority of the people were almost as if they were on stage giving a play. It wasn't as if they were right there with me in the kitchen having a conversation. I think to some degree that puts a little distance between you and your audience because you may not come off as authentic, as if you were just being yourself and being natural. I think if you take a look at the winner of the 2018 international competition, I think that you will find that she was very natural. It felt as if she was in the same room with you, laughing and talking, as she gave her speech on Still Standing. So if you wanted to have a great example of being natural, that would be one of the speeches I would highly recommend. Go on YouTube and look up, I missed her first name, but last name is Smith. Her speech was Still Standing. Fantastic example of being natural. The fourth thing I will call lessons learned from Toastmasters. Think about all the things that we have learned during our experience with Toastmasters. The importance of eye contact. Splitting your audience into sections so that each group will feel that you are speaking directly to them. It's terrible when you see a speaker looking up or looking down. It disconnects with the audience. Incorporate really good eye contact. Body motion or body language. Using your hands and using your arms. Using your position across the stage to set a tone, to emphasize the key points that you want to make. I found to be pretty critical. Moving across the stage with purpose. Think about if you're talking about timelines of going back to your right when you're talking about the past or moving to your left when you're talking about the future. Things that we learn in Toastmasters. Projection of voice. We want to make sure that the person all the way in the back hears every word, every sound that you make. Of taking deep breaths and speaking out. Just think about all the different things that we learn in Toastmasters that we do on a weekly basis. Those are the things that will help you to be successful in a competition. The fourth thing, or I should say the fifth thing that I did, at every level of competition, whether it was at the club, the area, division, and definitely at the district, I would always check out the room before the competition. When I say check out the room, I wouldn't just come 5 minutes early or 10, 15 minutes early. I typically would come a week or so before to go in and look at the space so that I felt very comfortable with the room. If there were questions that I had as far as what type of microphones, where things were going to be positioned in the room, that helped me to feel comfortable so that the day of that competition, when I walked in, when my name was called and I walked on that stage, I felt like it was my stage. This was my house because I had become comfortable with it. I knew every little thing on that stage that I needed to be aware of. So there was no, at the last minute, stepping up there and then trying to figure out this about the microphone or that. I'd already done all of that. I was confident and ready to go. Another part of what I would call checking it out is get there early enough that you have the opportunity to go out, mix, and mingle with the people that are there in the room. You wouldn't believe how much help that is in helping you to feel comfortable with those that are in the room, as well as helping them to be comfortable with you once you hit that stage. One of the things that I have found is that most people want you to be successful. Most people want you to succeed. So if you can begin to make those connections with people before you go up there, that brings them that much closer to you when you go on that stage and you begin to give your speech. So checking out that room, I would say days before the event, asking the Toastmaster tons of questions about things like the microphones, where people will be positioned, making sure that your bio has exactly what you want to say. And then, as I said, the day of, getting there early enough to introduce yourself to individuals so that they feel comfortable with you and you feel comfortable with them. And then number 6, we all have heard this, no matter whether you're public speaking or you're in sports, practice, practice, practice. You want to feel comfortable the day that you get on that stage. Because one of these things that happens sometime, and some of you may have experienced this, you'll be speaking, and all of a sudden, your mind goes blank. What do you do when you forget the next word that you have to say? I had that experience about 16 years ago. The very first time I ever competed in a contest in Toastmasters. I got up on stage, I was ready, I was giving my speech, then all of a sudden out of nowhere, I couldn't find the word I was going to say anywhere. Then I took a deep breath and I said something else. It wasn't what I initially intended to say, but because I felt comfortable enough with that speech, I had practiced it enough, I was able to still jump up and speak and keep it going. Of course, I knew I missed whatever that particular word was, but the audience did. So much of what we should be doing is practicing, practicing, practicing. Practice in front of people, practice by yourself, Videotaping is one of the best ways that I found to help you in practicing. As I was watching the video as you were, I was looking at it and said, oh, there's so many things that I should have done different. I should have done better. But I also picked up a number of things from watching myself on the video. You get to see how other people see you. You get to see how much you move. You get to see the facial expression. One of my club members told me, you really need to work on, because when you give your speeches, you do this grimacing look in your face. I had no idea I did that. But when I watched the video, sure enough, she was absolutely right. So video can give you a perspective that you can't get other than by actually seeing yourself. So those are the 6 things that I believe helped me. Is making sure that I had a topic that was personal. I identified the right people to advise me. I tried my very best to just be myself. Be natural. Not try to be like anyone else. I can only be me, and that's what I chose to be. I used the lessons that I learned on a weekly basis from my Toastmasters meeting. I checked out the location ahead of time so that I'm not feeling stressed the day of. And then 6, I did a lot of practice. So if you are thinking about and considering competing, I would highly recommend it. It will take your confidence level to a whole nother degree. I would highly recommend you go back and you talk to your club members. Suggest to them, compete. It makes you a better speaker. But really more important than just being a better speaker, it makes you a more confident person. It makes it easier for you to take on challenges that you before may have thought you couldn't. But when you compete, you take that deep breath and you say, wow, I can do that. So how about we open it up? Dave, I don't know if there are any questions. I will do my best to answer any questions the audience may have.
All right. We don't have any questions on the board right now, but I'm sure that we will have some. Okay. Mark, let me open up with a quick question for you while we wait for, and again, for questions, you can either raise your hand or you can type a question using the Q&A box. Mark, when this wasn't your first time competing, was it?
This was not my first time. My first time was back in 2000.
Okay.
I really had forgotten that I had even competed at that time. I had been in Toastmasters for about 2 years, and I was in the club located in General Mills.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to make it to the district level, which is the competition where I blacked out.
Oh.
And I hate to say that I went over time because of that blackout. And I made a commitment to myself that if I ever compete again, I would never, ever go over time. So when I got back into Toastmasters 3 years ago, and I got into the first competition, I always kept my eye on that light, making sure I'd never go over the 7 minutes.
Good advice. Good advice. So you mentioned that you gave this speech at a lot of different clubs and you got a lot of feedback, and I know a little bit what that's like, but how do you discern advice that is good or between advice that may not be quite as good? I can't help it. How do you discern advice that is wise and that which is otherwise?
No, that's a great question. There are a lot of good speakers that are out there in our district. And many people will have a lot of good recommendations on how to make changes. But one of the things that I found was that I had so much coming at me as far as advice that what I started out almost completely turned and changed 360 degrees. It didn't almost feel like the same speech that I had started out with. So in the process, in the middle of doing that, I realized while there's a lot of good advice out there, you have to pick and choose. And I decided I'd had very good experience with specific individuals in my club as far as their advice. And I decided I would just focus in on what their advice was. Because once again, there was just too much information that was coming from all these people I had met over the time of visiting clubs. And that's where I really focused on. I think you also have to have really faith in your gut as well. While someone may give you some advice on making a change, that change may be good for them, but it may not be good for you in your presentation style. If that individual was doing the same speech, they might hit it out the park. But if I do it the way they suggested that I do it, it doesn't feel comfortable and I strike out. So I pay attention to what people said. Those things that sounded really good, I would incorporate. But for the vast majority of the time, and this was probably the second half of me doing all my practicing, I decided I need to kind of focus more so on what the group of 5 shared with me as opposed to the hundreds of people I had an opportunity to meet over the course of the summer as I was preparing to go to Vancouver.
All right. Let me ask you, Mark, and I'm watching for questions here, and I will pop in an audience question, but I think it's a great opportunity to be here listening to you talk about this. But as I was watching that speech, what if I was watching that and saying, you know, I don't think I could compete at that level. Should I still try to enter a speech contest? And maybe I'm a newer Toastmaster. What would I expect to gain by entering a speech contest for the very first time?
You know, one of the things I would tell everybody, always remember, chances are the majority of people you're competing with are saying the exact same thing. I'm not at that level to compete. I can guarantee you, you are at that level to compete. Take a deep breath, throw your name in the hat, and just get out there. One of the things that I found the very first time that I competed after giving my speech, and when I won, it kind of made me feel a lot more confident, and I started to stand a little bit taller. I didn't think I was going to win, but I did win. And it's something about competing brings out the best in you. It's almost like working out. You have a coach that's there on the side, and they're continuing to push you and push you and push you. And you tend to do more than what you would have done if you're just doing it all on your own. And that's the same way that I look at competition. It's once you get on that stage and you see all the other people you're competing with, it just takes you to a whole another level. I remember when at the district competition, I went on the stage, and the first time I heard the audience laugh, I felt a rush of energy inside of me. And my confidence level just went out the roof. So I would highly recommend, no matter how fearful you may be at just the thought of being in front of 200, 300 people, go out there and do it, because it's going to make you a better speaker. It's going to make you more confident. And as I said, the great thing about this is that it overflows into other things in your life that has nothing to do with public speaking.
All right, good point. Hey, one thing that I thought of when I was competing, and especially the very first time, actually every time, is, you know, you learn from watching other people do well as well. And sometimes you know, just the interactions before and after, it helps make you a better listener, and you pick up a lot of tips on how to fine tune your speech. Did you have that same interaction, you know, from maybe the first time you competed, when you, kind of went in, you saw these other speakers that were competing against you, and you learned from them as well as.
You know, one of the things that I did leading up to the district competition is that I would go and visit other competitions just to get an idea of who I was going to possibly be competing with, seeing other people's style. And that, in a way, helped me to feel a little bit more confident, because I wasn't going to walk into the district competition being totally surprised. So that gave me an opportunity to hear the competition, to see what they did well, and for me to learn from what they were doing that I might be able to incorporate when I was speaking as well. I remember when I went to Vancouver for the semifinals, of how I felt after I competed. Unfortunately, I didn't win my semifinals group, but I walked away from that experience feeling extremely confident and could not wait until the next year to compete. Because one of the things that I found, even when you get to that level, when you think there's 30,000 plus people in Toastmasters, you narrow it down to about 100 people that are competing to be on that stage for that final of 10 people, that they're just regular people. Just like you, just like me. They have a story to tell, and they tell the story. And I found out I could tell my story right along with everyone else. So there's somebody that's out there right now that has a fantastic story to tell that could possibly take them to the finals as well. And we've had a number of speakers that are here in our district that have done pretty well far as placing in semifinals. Kenny Ray Morgan, who went last year, has gone a number of years. Caroline Lindstead, who happens to be in my chapter, went in 2014. I believe the year that she went, she may have been in Toastmasters barely a year. So she hit every level here and then went on to the semifinals. So any of us can go. We just have to find the right topic, be ourselves, engage with the audience, and do a number of those different things that I suggested that I believe helped me to make it to that level.
Excellent. Well said. Hey, we've got a couple of audience questions here.
Okay.
Brian is asking, you said to be natural, not theatrical. What's the difference?
I believe, at least for me, overemphasizing words, and while I understand when you're talking to an audience, you have to make sure your gestures can be seen, but sometimes we can overdo the gestures. I look at it as, see yourself having a conversation with an individual in the audience, as if you're having a conversation with a friend in the kitchen at the kitchen table. Use the same type of gestures. Smile when you speak, but don't overdo it. Okay. And I guess that's primarily it. Don't be overly with your body gestures and even how you pronounce your words. Be careful that you aren't overdoing it.
All right. Here's a question that's interesting. How have things changed for you since you won the speech contest? And that we're talking the District 6 contest in 2017. Also, what was the most important thing that you learned from it?
Two good questions. Probably one of the biggest things that has changed since winning is that my name has been changed. I now know a significant more number of people in the district than what I knew before I gave the speech. And people don't call me Mark. They say, you're that bro hug guy. So that has been the name I now have. I can walk in a district training or event. I have numerous people that will come up and call me that. or they'll walk up and right away they'll give me a bro hug. So I believe it has helped me a lot just with connecting with a number of people in this district that I had never met before. And then the second question of what I learned from the experience.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I learned, probably one of the main things that I learned from the experience is, once again, everyone that I'm competing against, they're just regular people just like I am. There's nothing all that different from them. They have great stories, like I had a great story, and they tell the stories. I also learned that you have to have the right mindset and think positive as far as going out and speak. And also at the same time, to stay humble. And when I say stay humble, so after you start winning, then you can start almost feeling like, okay, I won the last one, so I'm going to win the next one. And that kind of thinking will cause you to make mistakes and trip on things. So every single time that I won that year, I was honestly surprised that I won. I always had at least two other people that were placed ahead of me in my mind when I won. So one of the things I would highly recommend to people is don't get cocky. Don't get cocky at all. Do your very best, but stay humble. So that was one of the big things I learned, is about staying humble.
That is really good advice. That's something that we can learn or that we can use in all aspects of life. And
yeah,
there's a lot of sports teams that need to remember that as well. So here's an interesting question. How many World Championship of Public Speakings did you watch before the final competition? So were you watching past champions give speeches, and were you looking for pointers that way?
I did. I went on YouTube and I just pulled up various years. I probably watched at least 10 different competitions just to see things like, how did they open, how did they close, what is it that they did different from other speakers. Helped me to develop some level of confidence to see, okay, that's something that I try to do in my speeches. And it even picked up some new tips by watching individuals as well. So I would definitely recommend people to watch other people that already have done it, because you can get some good advice from someone that may not be talking directly to you. If you can watch how they did it, what they did, to help you to really tighten up your presentation. You know, I also shared that not only did I look at the international champions, but I also, as I said, I visited a lot of the competitions as they led up to the different levels just locally here. When I went to, once I won my division, I tried to visit every division competition. So as I said, I actually learned things from even individuals that didn't win. I still learn things from those speakers as well. You know, one of the things the way that I look at, anybody can win any day. And I say that to say, you have to have a good topic. You have to hit people emotionally, but you also have to be able to present it in the right way on that particular day and move your body at the right way that particular day. Be able to use a pause, just the right amount of time to emphasize something that will touch somebody's heart, that will cause a tear come to their eye. So there's a lot that I just learned from watching other people do what they did as far as their presentation. They didn't all win their particular competition. Many of them had some real good examples of doing a certain thing that I believe helped me in my presentations.
All right. Hey, I've got a question from John.
Hey, John.
And John was asking, and it was actually following up on the question before the last one, on and what he said is, he said, to follow up, what lessons did you learn from last year when you took second place? And then in parentheses he put, I thought you finished in first place. So you got a vote. You got John's vote. But
well, John, the number one thing that I learned is to make sure that I go after Kenny Ray and not before Kenny Ray. Kenny Ray is a fantastic presenter. That's a great individual to watch, to just learn how to be a fantastic speaker. I had an opportunity to visit his home, and he showed me how he categorized all of his speeches. I mean, this guy is a professional in the craft of being a public speaker. So one of the things, as I said, if I could have changed the order on that particular day, that definitely would have been one of the things to change. But one thing I did learn from him that day was being able to make adjustments to your speech based upon some of the things that were said during the course of the competition. I think his ability to do that and not trip over what he had already practiced really drew the audience in. He did a lot of what they call kind of playback. He had mentioned something that was mentioned in another speech, and that made it fun for the audience. And that's what we're there to do, is to make it fun, to make it enjoyable for the people that's sitting out in the audience. You know, one of the things that I learned from that experience as well is it's not about you during that presentation. It's really about everybody else. Trying to connect with them so that some of the experience that you had will connect with some of the personal experiences that they are currently having or they have had as well.
And I think that lines up really well with what you said on practicing and practice so that you know your message well enough and not necessarily memorize word for word, so that when you're up there, you have a bit of freedom. You know where you're going.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you learn to ride your bike and then you learn to ride with no hands. You know, and at first it's scary and you're afraid you're going to fall, but you can take your hands off the wheel and do a little bit of ad lib and then get back on and steer.
I think that's part of one of the things when I say about being natural as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in your mind reading a script, which can cause you to look sometimes maybe a little stiff or maybe a little theatrical, but to be able to go with the flow, meaning you're up there and you're speaking and you're kind of reading the audience. There are parts where you may get a laugh line that you had no idea you was going to get a laugh line. Well, you have to let that play out. Just be quiet and let all the laughter go through. You may find that there's a part in your speech that you seem to have gotten a lot of reaction to. Or maybe that's an opportunity for you to come back to that at a latter part of your speech. You may not have originally had that in there, but I think that's part of being able to really read your audience, and that will help you to come off as being more natural.
All right, very well said. Hey, Mark, I think we've gotten through most of the questions here. We are over time, but it was time well spent. Mark, I truly want to thank you for coming out and sharing with us. And if you're a new Toastmaster or you're watching this live or recorded online and you're thinking about competing in a speech contest this year, I will tell you one thing, and I think Mark will agree with me. I have never met someone who has competed in a speech contest and said, boy, I wish I hadn't competed. I think we all grow from the experience. And would you say that's true, Mark?
I would say that's absolutely true. I would highly recommend. Even if you're afraid, just get out there, do it, and you will be happy that you did.
All right. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for dedicating your time to come in and help us learn a lot about how to prepare for a speech contest. And I want to thank all of you who attended for coming out and taking part in this. And definitely share this message. This will be recorded. We'll put it up on our D106 website, along with all of our other Toolbox Tuesdays. Next week, we're coming back and we are talking about moments of truth, fellowship, variety, and communication. And I hope that you'll join in for that. Mark, thank you. This has been Toolbox Tuesday, and we'll see you next week.